This podcast is intended for a mature audience. If you are under 18 years of age, please come back when you are to enjoy our content. The information, opinions, and stories shared in this podcast are for educational purposes only. The content creators are not certified sex therapists or counselors and rely heavily on experts. Come explore, learn, and grow with us. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Ellie.
Spring is here and it is dry. Do you know anything about places where it's dry, Alex?
No, not a clue.
Not a clue.
Not the slightest bit. I've never been in a place that's been dry all my life.
Liar. We're not used to it here is what I'm basically saying. So this week's been a tough week for us. Just feeling off.
Excuse me, let me dig out the world's smallest violin, which, by the way, goes with the theme of this episode.
Yes, sex and music. But before we get to today's show, can I do a shout out?
I insist.
I'd like to do a shout out to CW Raincock. He's also known as In My Dark Hours on what used to be known as Twitter X. I want to thank him for sharing our links to our podcast and helping us to reach more people. We appreciate his support. And to answer his email, yes, you are on the fan train, I think he called it. Choo choo.
All aboard.
And I also wanted to share that I've been doing some research to shape future episodes. And I was looking at stuff on erotic poetry. And all my digging around and searching has led me to start following some very creative and passionate people who, well, they offer all levels of vulnerability in their writing and their posts. And so one day there was some witty, cute memes floating around Instagram. And so I decided to post one I had found about coffee. Nothing of mine. I stole it. It was a cup of steamy hot coffee with a text on it that said, "I'm hot, I'm wet, I taste delicious," and it was signed coffee. But I crossed it off and signed it from Ellie. And it caught the attention of a new Instagram follower named Asmodeus. Anyways, Asmodeus private messaged me and I went and checked out the profile, and they usually post poetry. And he's actually added a little bit that I wanted to read because no one else could see it, but I thought it was rather, I don't know, complimentary and kind of witty. He added that she'll keep you awake all night. She has incredible aromatics, and she's the burst of energy you never knew you needed until you take a sip. And that just made me smile. And I just wanted to thank the people who dip into our DMs, like Asmodeus, or people who email us. So listeners, go check out Asmodeus and his poetry. And I just wanted to do that shout out.
A little quick digging. Asmodeus is the king of demons in some of the more apocryphal stories from Abrahamic religions.
Oh, interesting. See? I knew you'd be able to add to that because I needed something to fill this part, the intro, because this is ordinarily where I'd have ChatGPT read us in. But unfortunately, we had to let him go.
Yes, ChatGPT has been fired, like a certain joke about rainbows. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I would really suggest going to our episode 10 with Dolly, aka I Want Nice Things, and just follow that along.
Mm-hmm.
He got lazy, he got repetitive, and we just had to let him go. This is a creative space. We need something that will actually keep us moving and not a tool that we need to fight with to get something good out of.
Exactly. And you know what? You and I, we can hold our own. Speaking of creative then, can I ask you to be creative? How would you describe your orgasm?
Well, that would depend entirely on the specific orgasm, because I think that women have the idea that men's orgasms are even remotely comparable in intensity and duration, and they're not. They're basically just like, oh, okay, there we go. That was nice. Okay, moving on. So that's like 99% of those. So there's not a whole lot of description that goes into it.
Not even like in like the buildup. Like you're not doing it for me today.
I'm not doing it for myself today. Heyo. But no, seriously, there's not, sometimes there really is not a lot to describe. It's just kind of like a feeling of like relief more than anything else. And that's really just about it. You have to get, if you're really in a very intense session, you've been going for a while and it's with a partner that you trust, you can have that build up, and then you can have that shaking, excited release. And then you can do that soothing calm down afterwards, as you're kind of just letting your body kind of rest and go down from its peak. But the vast majority of the time, it's kind of like a maintenance thing. It's almost like, okay, clean that pipe, moving on.
Oh, Jesus. Well, maybe I should have asked you what your climax is like, because that you did start getting me going there. I once was asked to describe what my orgasm, I'll replace the word now with climax, what it feels like to me as a woman. It was a curious man on FetLife. And I told him that it was like a symphony. So I wanted to share a little bit more about that on our show today, because one, we fired ChatGPT and I needed to fill the space, but two, it fits in with our show of sex and music. So do you want to hear how my orgasm is like a symphony?
Okay, let's go. Let's do it. Am I seated in like the horn section, or?
Tell me after you hear the description.
Got it.
I told him that there are many instruments at play with my orgasm. There's the heavy beat of the percussion instruments, which is like my breath. There's the soft woodwinds, which is my partner's whisper in my ear or gentle breath on my skin. Then there's the gentle stringed instruments, my own fingertips maybe on my clit. And then the changing pace, like a talented, intuitive playmate or lover, from the soft flirtation to the hard and fast crescendo that is my climax. It's no wonder that I love to incorporate music into my lovemaking and my sexy encounters. That's a far cry from how you just described yours.
I'm sorry for being male, I guess.
Well, this is also the part where we tell our listeners exactly what we have in store from them. Cliff's Notes and all. You want to take it?
Yes. Oh, yes. Cliff's Notes. Oh, see, you got me there for a second.
I almost got you.
Almost. I'm just so used to correcting you. So joining us today, we're going to have Marc from Boombox Music Talk to kind of give us a little bit more of a rundown about the ins and outs of music and sound and sex and what effect it has on people, because this is one of those things where we just really felt like we need to bring in an expert. And so if you've listened to our cyberpunk episode, then you know that I dabble a little bit, but I'm not at the same level. So I would much rather let a proper professional kind of go into those details.
Okay, well, before we get into the meat and potatoes of our show, I wanted to share that I actually discovered a sex dictionary at a website called kinkly.com. And I wanted to look for some vocabulary terms or slang to go with our sex and music episode. And right on the main screen, I noticed that it had a term of the day. And its term of that specific day, that word, was clap. Just a simple 4-letter word. But it's not. No, it's not what you're thinking there.
No. Well, is it? Tell me and let's see.
Well, it's not what an audience member does after a song at a music concert or in a performance. It is actually referring to the slang term for gonorrhea. But do you know how that term came to be?
No, but I do know that the joke is generally he gets gonorrhea so often that it might as well be called applause.
Well, the term's actually been used since the 16th century, and it refers to the historic treatment for gonorrhea, which involved clapping the penis simultaneously on both sides. And the treatment was intended to clear the gonorrhea pus from the urethra. Today, the clap is treated using... Yeah, you're not liking that?
That's just a delightful image to head into with this episode.
I know. And here,
this is why we have antibiotics now. We don't have to do that. And also, that doesn't actually treat it very well. That just treats the symptoms and not the underlying cause, which is a bacterial infection, for which we have antibiotics.
Okay. Well, I always have a way of turning everything sexual. So I giggled at a lot of the words that came up, especially the slang term bangin'. Bangin's used to describe... No, don't go there. It's just to describe the music that's energetic, exciting, or highly enjoyable.
So like a banger.
which is a popular or catchy song. Why? Where's your brain going all the time here?
Well, no, the banging, I had a friend who would flirt with me, and instead of saying like have sex or make love or hook up, she would use the word bang, and I needed to pretend that that was really arousing. And I was like, okay, no, she's really nice and I appreciate it. I need to get over this. I just need to deep down. I need to get excited about being invited to bang.
How come I have this vague recollection of a scene from How I Met Your Mother? Bang, bang, bangity bang, 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 bang. Do you know that one?
I blocked that show from memory pretty effectively, I think, and I would like to keep it that way.
Well, maybe our listeners are connecting with me on that show because it's fucking hilarious. But my memory is spotty. So sometimes I have these memories and I'm like, was it really bang that they were saying? Or am I now making up my own little song?
And speaking of songs,
I was wondering what you were going to do with that one. Alex, do you and your spouse have a song? You know,
no.
Your song?
No.
No way.
Yes, way. You have to, you have to understand we're not like your typical lovey-dovey couple, and we don't really have like our song this and our favorite romantic comedy and all of that. We just kind of go to all of that. We're very much just, take life by the cojones and have fun and not really, and we don't really do a lot of the typical milestones that a lot of people do.
Interesting. Do you want to know what is our song?
Sure.
Like, I find it interesting when I ask people what is their song, why is it what it is, and how did it become so? Ours is Groovy Kind of Love by Phil Collins. We were in our late teens. We were drunk at a post-social party, and it's an 80s ballad. Yeah, and it just became our song. It's not that it's our favorite song. It's a really sappy song, but it's kind of like one of those songs.
Oh, hey, I was slightly alive when that came out.
Yes, you were. Are you Googling it?
Yep. I mean, I wasn't in diapers anymore, so there's that. So you can feel a little bit better about that. But I was.
We've made it well known that there is an age difference between you and I, Alex. But come on, have you ever made a mixtape? Or are you telling me that's something that only old folks did?
I mean, we had mixed CDs, but the concept was the same. And so the answer is yes. And I had my own spin to it. But I think that's a story better left for the end of the show.
Nice. Leave them wanting more. Well, I received a few mixtapes, and they were the tape that you had to shove the pencil in and rewind it when it would all come loose. It was that actual type of tape.
Oh, I did used to do that as a little kid, too.
When you were 3. Yeah, shut up. So I just wanted to ask our listeners, do you have favorite memories of mixtapes from when you were younger? Mine had a lot of Scorpions, Bruce Springsteen, Bryan Adams, Aerosmith, Def Leppard. There were sometimes songs that could actually kill a vibe or a mood that might show up either on the radio or a mixtape. Songs that maybe reminded you of an ex, or maybe they had love, the word love in it too soon or too early in a relationship. Are there any songs that do that for you, Alex?
I mean, I think it just has to do with like the key. If you're getting into something and it's completely off key or the mood is completely wrong to what you were doing, like it's a very abrupt transition, I think that would kill a mood immediately. Like you can't really go from like something that's a little bit more like melodic, like almost like a, 80s pop tune to like hardcore gangster rap. It doesn't work. It doesn't flow. So I think that would probably be a good example of what I would consider as ruining the mood.
Well, I'm going to call to the scientist in you and ask you if you know of any studies on how music influences mood, or maybe how music can be used to maybe control people.
So there's been studies that basically show that if you listen to your favorite music, your blood pressure and heartbeat goes down, and that music, your favorite music, can help deal with pain. So, for example, there are people who have surgeries where it's very dangerous to use the amount of anesthetic that would just completely knock them out, or something that they know for a fact will dull all of the pain. And they kind of have to deal with it a little bit. So usually it's in surgeries where there's something wrapped around the heart or something of that nature. And go and just listening to their favorite music and doing a lot of breathing exercises. A lot of times these people get through it and they're like, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Like, yeah, it was unpleasant, but it wasn't horrible. Like, I wasn't screaming in pain the whole time. So music can be very powerful, but can it be used to control people? The experiments say no, not really, because you have to be very suggestible to do that. And most people really aren't. And if they are in that very suggestible space, they were probably going to do it anyway. And you don't need to use music to tell them. You can just literally tell them, this is what I want you to do. So the whole idea of like subliminal messages, the whole satanic panic where people were playing music and then backwards, it was giving them satanic messages to kill themselves or something of that nature. I think there was a great response by a number of metal bands who said, okay, so you're telling us that we're putting out all these albums to manipulate people and we're telling them to kill themselves and kill their families and sacrifice themselves to say, why wouldn't we just tell them to buy more records? Like, that's ultimately what we want. Like, that's how you would catch us. Our secret message played backwards would be buy more records, buy more merch, buy our concert tickets. So we know that doesn't work. There's been a lot of experiments, and the problem is people don't really hear it or detect it. If they can't hear it or really detect it, they can't internalize it. If they can't internalize it, they can't be suggested to do that. So it doesn't work. That's just the long and short of it.
I was also thinking back to our dead bedroom episode and wondering that if you are in a dead bedroom, if there would be music that would get your spouse in the mood, or basically what you're saying is it goes a lot deeper than that.
I'm just saying it's a lot more complicated than that. Yeah, you can put on your favorite song all you want. I don't necessarily think that's gonna help. There's gonna be other things that you're gonna need to address first. And we have an entire episode about that too. That's the cool part about racking up the episodes. We have some depth for everyone, and that would be our Dead Bedrooms episode.
Yeah, no, this is the part in our show where we lean on our experts in the field. And as you said earlier, we're going to talk to someone who specializes in music. And so let's welcome Marc from Boombox Music. Hello and welcome, Marc. How are you today?
I am, all things considered, doing pretty damn well, which is still not great a lot of times. Whatever that means anymore, like somewhere in that range.
Sounds like most adults I speak to.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
That's okay. Adulting is terrible, and I would like an adult to take over for me. Unfortunately, one is not available. So
never is whenever you need them.
No.
So I'm still getting adjusted a little bit to losing both of my parents. Like, I lost my mom 2006, and then in 2018, I think it was, we lost our dad to Alzheimer's, which is really took me down the path of wanting to do a podcast. And I'm sure you all can relate. Is just that, like, wanting to capture. He always had these good stories, and I never captured them. And I wish I would have. I'm like, no, we should do this for our generations. I always encourage everybody, like, do it. Like, it's audio scrapbooking. Anyway, sorry. I don't know why did I even go down that path?
No, I love it. I love it. That's where my heart is right now. Marc, no, I just spent a whole weekend. I'm recording my aunt's stories. She's in her 70s in a care home right now, and she's failing quickly. And so we're doing a recording project of all her favorite stories. And we actually talked in this last visit. I won't call it an episode. This last visit that I want to touch on music next. And then here I am sitting with Marc of Boombox Music Talk and connecting with you about stories. I love it. But let's stay on the topic of music today. It is.
Yeah,
it's cool. It's cool. Can you actually start by talking to us about episode 13? I was listening to your podcast. It was, I think, from October of last year. It was a moment in time episode that you did. It was unscripted. You were just chatting about pop culture's focus on frequency. And this is what kind of spurred on this topic, as well as some conversations I've had with a friend of mine about frequency in music. So can you share with us a little bit and our listeners about what you kind of talked about and how you compared your brain how was it? You compared it to your brain inside of your skull and what music does inside. You just take it. You know what I mean?
Yes. No, I mean, so first of all, it's so funny, you always plan these things out and you hope it goes well. And then sometimes the unscripted stuff ends up being some of the coolest. But yeah, I was in an episode just kind of talking about it's cool that for so long, I and my inner circle, you have these conversations about sound and music and how it affects you. And on multiple levels. And for a long time, you only had little spurts here and there of it in like pop culture in TV or film or whatever, where they would concentrate on it. It would be really cool. And then it would just kind of die out. And I started noticing that there was a lot more kind of shows and just media in general that are starting to focus on the power of sound, how frequency can affect us, how, not just as in a, setting a mood, which is super crucial and important to that conversation, but also literally affects us. It's a physical thing that we forget sometimes that is tangible. And so I started noticing these different shows and just wanted to kind of chat a little bit about that. The idea of the the skull thing. Anybody who's into philosophy, if you are not familiar with Alan Watts, he was a philosopher that came over and kind of helped introduce a lot of Eastern thoughts to America in the 60s, and a lot of ideas that people were not familiar with. But he had this, and I'd listened to a lot of his talks, but he had this idea that there's a mental echo chamber in your mind that's similar to the way sound exists and bounces off of walls in real life, right? So I discovered this. I mean, I think we've all growing up probably heard a sound and it hits your ear and you're like, wait, you look over to your left. Did that come from over there? But the TV's over here, right? And you learn as you grow up how sound bounces, but you don't think about it too much. Well, as a musician for a long time, just playing shows, I would notice if we were in certain venues that were very kind of insulated from a concrete standpoint. So not insulated in terms of absorbing the sound, but it's going to echo, right? It's going to bounce. And you would go, if you're doing like a cover night, doing, as a cover band or, one of those kind of gigs, you usually do like 3 sets or something like that. First set, you get up, it's sounding great. You get everything kind of where you want it in the mix and EQ and everything. Second set comes along and you inch it up just a little bit because people are starting to have a good time and you want it to be just a little bit louder. But all the time, those sound waves are just bouncing. They don't dissipate. They don't go anywhere. There's nowhere for them to go. They just have to dial on their own, which actually sound can last a long time. And by the third set, I would get up and sometimes I would look down and I knew I was playing, say a G chord, but it literally does not sound, it sounds like something completely different. And so I understood how if you just keep doing that, it's just one mesh, right? It keeps amplifying, amplifying, amplifying. And that same thing can be said about your mind and your thought patterns. If we all know, like, think positive, good things are going to happen. You manifest it and you know all these things, but literally there's a level that you can see your brain waves, the activity, neurons firing off, starts bouncing around. And if you are not thinking about something good, especially, those thoughts just keep bouncing and bouncing. And we do it ourselves, right? I do it all the time, like constantly talking to myself, working through the situation. And what am I going to do? What about this? What if it goes this way? How do you do this? And you just keep going and going and going until it drives you crazy, right? And so you have to de-stress and find ways to kind of step away. And, music can serve that for people. But it's just that idea that even on the macro level and the micro level, you can see that sound governs our actions and can affect us way more than we give it credit for in a given day, right? So
affect us, like, are you talking about possibly healing powers? Like, how do those frequencies affect us in our body, within our body?
Yeah, well, I claim not to be a scientist by any means. I'm horrible with I always say nouns like specific knowledge to pull them out. But yeah, I mean, so to me, a few ways really. There's, when you start looking at it, it can literally, let's say, from a sound perspective, if it's hitting you in a certain frequency, let's say repeatedly over and over and over, it doesn't really come off that note very much. It's very similar of like if you were to go up to somebody and just keep, hey, I'm just touching you. And it doesn't seem like much, but if you just keep touching that same fucking spot over and over and over, oh my God, it's like the worst thing ever, right? You're like, no, quit, please, stop it or whatever. And it's that same kind of idea that, depending on what you're putting into it is what you're going to get out of it in terms of what I believe anyway. And so if you take something that is from a healing power, to me, that's more, if you think about thoughts being a tangible thing as well, like sound is that we don't see, if you were to, sit down inside of a pyramid or some type of super dense stone, structure, I personally can totally see where whatever you're putting out, I mean, it's just going to keep bouncing and resonating. And there's a certain energy. You wouldn't want to necessarily call it good or bad to me. It's different. It's got a different shape, right? And what you're wanting it to do in the end run, which is heal you in that kind of case. Like I can totally see where it would come back and literally start to move things in the right direction that you need it to. But
so maybe not physiological or biological.
Yeah.
Yep. Biological, but even psychological. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I've heard in another podcast, that episode actually, I think is when you talked about neuro oscillators and dopamine. So you do get a little geeky, a little nerdy when it comes to the science behind music. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
That you know?
Yeah. It is. I mean, so again, there was actually, in that same episode, we got on this topic about, there's a YouTube channel called Veritasium, and they did a short on this about how if you're walking on a bridge, you have to be careful not to tune the bridge, because everything puts off, a wave. You don't want to tune it to the same frequency. And I can't remember what that frequency is, 2 hertz, I think maybe, or something, because that's about the rate that you step across the bridge. And if you have too many people doing that at once, right, you can put pressure. That's why you see those images of, bridges that are super wobbly, or it can cause them to break. And so like when armies go across it, they have to stop walking in lockstep, because they, if they keep putting that pressure down in those same spots like that and together, and it's amplifying the same mental echo chamber idea, you see how it could get in there and kind of break it down. But if you take that same kind of idea and think of it from the mental standpoint, there's a book. What is the gentleman's name? Levitin. It's Your Brain on Music. And if anybody does want to get it does get pretty nerdy into it. So you got to want to get into the music side of, the scientific side of things, but how your brain is affected. But yeah, there's these neural oscillators in it. Naturally, they, just like a crowd of people, they naturally start to want to move in groove to whatever, if you're listening to something and there's a rhythm there, your body actually is it doesn't want to go against things, right? It wants to go with the vibe. And so it'll naturally lock up to that. And to me, it's a really interesting concept of why we, like to get into a groove on something. If you're having sex, if you're working, if you're, working out, doing something where you got to concentrate on, again, you're taking something that's external and literally manipulating your mind a little bit to put it in whatever state that you want it to be in, if you're conscious of it, right? That's the thing. I mean, most of us, we don't even I don't think about it a lot. So, or actually I do, but you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So fun fact, if you think that soldiers walking in a bridge in unison can't possibly bring a bridge down, Mythbusters actually did an episode on that. It's season 2, episode 11, the break step bridge, where they proved that, yes, that is very much possible, because you get these recurrent oscillations that amplify each other. And in numerous fields of science, figuring out how to get waves to build on each other or oscillate can be used with great effect for a lot of things. Everything from imaging to weaponry to radio astronomy.
Yes, thank you for saying that. That's so cool. Because, a lot of times I think most people, unless you have just a super great memory, you're like, sometimes I know what I'm talking about, and sometimes I'm completely full of shit. I don't know. Let's see. Hopefully this is right on. Yeah, I can totally see that. And the weapon thing is pretty interesting if you think about all the capacities that could be used in, and some of the old stories like, the Wall of Jericho and that kind of stuff, sound being used to amplify it in the right frequency of whatever that wall is. If you knew how it was made, you could match that and then eventually tear it down that way. Like it's not like it takes some high tech instrument either. That's the cool
Precision
thing.
Demolitions, Bronze Age edition. So,
Yeah.
speaking
Exactly.
of weaponry and how to use sound for evil, the Jaws main theme that is that sends a shiver down anybody's spine.
I was thinking of that.
And it has this subliminal suggestion how to feel that moment. So it's that infrasound that's layered underneath it that gives you that real sense of unease. So are there any other themes or sounds or scores that you can think of that have these subliminal suggestions on how to feel at that moment?
Yeah. Every time I get a question like this, like my head explodes. I picture it just in a bunch of pieces and all these different directions you can go, and like, oh no, which direction do you go? But it is interesting, right? That there's obviously something universal to that, because a bunch of people feel that way. It's not like a small subset of people that are affected that way, right? And it's interesting too to think about how composers literally, you said subliminal suggestion. And I love that phrase, because it's like, that's literally their job the entire time you're watching something, is to help reinforce whatever the person is trying to get across and make you feel it through the sound. And it can literally, change the mood of it or intent right away. Even if you think about, like, speaking of oscillations and, frequency, it like a stringed instrument. And you hear sometimes, especially in like scary movies, where they're just taking the bow and they're going real fast back and forth on a note, right? Or maybe they're sliding the note around. But it creates this tension. You can feel it, like you're taking a wire and you're just pulling it and pulling it. You can see it just shaking. Is it going to stay? I don't know. Because our bodies naturally want resolve. We want resolution. And in that book, he even talks about that from a brain standpoint. Your brain learns how to fill in the dots, right, of what's coming up next. So it naturally will complete it for you to make it even more in groove. So our bodies naturally are going in the right wave, vibing with something. And it wants to come back to that note. But if you just stay, that tension of that note, just stay. Or like in the Jaws theme, where it's literally like, it's not like it doesn't ever really get to this beautiful, like, aha, here we are. It's always just kind of, even when the larger pieces on top come on, it's always just kind of like, don't know what's going to happen. And one recent example to me is there's a show called Devs on Hulu. If you haven't seen it, it's the premise is kind of they build this technology that is so good at predicting. So it's kind of a numbers crunching thing that it takes the past and learns from that it can literally tell you, kind of what's going to happen in the near future, or go back in time and recreate those things, because it can process that kind of idea. And the score in that, I should have their names in front of me. That would be nice, but there's a couple of different artists that work on the score for it. And a lot of it is like score mixed with sound design. So it's not a lot of like melodic music going on. There are parts of it, and some of it is actually pretty addictive, but there is a lot of like just sounds in somewhat of a musical way to give across this impactful machine, nuance to it that you can feel.
Can I interrupt
processing. Here? Yes, please.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm envisioning Sheldon's musical instrument on Big Bang Theory. Do you know the one that's got that high pitched, and he does theremin? I thought it started with a PH, and it's like, nah, 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 and it moves you, but yet you want it over with. So he plays that annoying instrument, but yet it's such an impactful piece where it goes up really high, and then you want it over with, and yet it's so familiar. You know which episode I'm talking about, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
My favorite thing about the theremin is if you buy a used one, they've never been touched.
Yes, absolutely. And what a weird, talk about, science and what's that, the phrase, I don't know if it's Arthur C. Clarke or somebody like that, about the whole, any sufficient technology would be indistinguishable from magic or whatever.
Yep. That's Clarke's law.
The theremin is that. And that's a theremin in process, right? Like, what are you doing? How are you doing that?
The other movie that I was thinking about, weren't you and I talking about the movie Private Parts? Wasn't there an impactful scene about music and rhythm or beat or something? You had me Google a YouTube piece. Do you remember that?
Yes. And I'm dating myself by that, probably that reference a little bit for Private Parts, the old Howard Stern movie. But again, there was all these little moments like as I was aging from the time I was a little boy, because I'm the youngest of 4 sons. So I learned a lot from watching people to just, as you progress and learn about the world. That was one of those examples where I was like, sound is really can be impactful in unique ways, where he literally on the radio started doing a low pitch while he was talking to this woman and claiming that he could make her have an orgasm just by his voice. So he has her set the speaker down. She, takes her clothes off, sits on top of it, and he just starts making like a sound, right? And she does have an orgasm, but the idea, obviously, he's trying to make it about himself, like that he's cool, he's sexy, right? But literally, bass, and if you think about like bass being omnidirectional, right? Or omnidirectional. It doesn't, like treble is in mids to highs are going to shoot a direction. So like you kind of have to sit in front of a speaker really to get the full range of it. Whereas in bass, it's going to go out equally in all areas, right? All around it. It doesn't have to point a direction. That's why, when we were younger, we got bass, bass speaker and put it in a sub so that it would just amplify like that again, that amplification. So literally having it be able to go out in all angles and amplify in that direction as a physical, tangible thing could I never tested it. I should have tested that. Might have to do it now just to see. But I mean, and it goes back to, when you were kids and you literally the first time if you go to a concert and you hear that bass note and the way it hits you and you're like, holy shit, I felt it in my chest. Like that was a punch. That is not something that only your ears are picking up. Our ears obviously are there to detect sound, but there's a physical vibration that's coming off of it that you feel. In fact, whenever I was younger playing a show, I had a girl that was deaf. I studied sign language for a little while in college. I don't remember a ton of it now, but she watched the show. We did a 4th of July show and she watched it and then came up afterwards and was talking to us through her mother saying how much she enjoyed it. But you could see her come up and, sit on the speaker, feel it, or just sit next to it and those kinds of things. And she was grooving with the vibrations. And if that's not a great example of how sound is a physical thing, it doesn't have to be what we think of it as a sound with our ears. And I don't know what is, right?
So fun fact, scientists do think that we have more than 5 senses, and the other senses are electromagnetic. So pressure waves from sounds and from music could also disrupt the electromagnetic sensitivity. So almost like a little bit with a shark. So it's entirely plausible to think that we perceive music with multiple senses. Although again, this is still kind of a area of research, but scientists are pretty sure this is accurate. Like there's been a number of journal articles about it. So it's not just random guesswork here.
Right.
Oh no, I remember I was just going to say my son's first concert. You said as kids, he was 12. It was Simple Plan. They were a nice kind of pop band. And the first thing he said to me was, Mama, I got a tummy ache. And I said, really? What does it feel like? And he's like, well, it's really deep and it's just sore and it just won't go away. I said, I think you're feeling the bass, honey. Just kind of sink into it. You'll get used to it. And next thing I know, he was standing on the chair, just grooving out to the music, but he had to let his body adjust. And it was just that. It was the bass. Yeah.
Yep. Totally.
So let's talk a little bit about the great 440 hertz conspiracy. The idea that the music industry changed the frequency used in music production on the radio so it could be used to control society. Now, I obviously have opinions on that as well.
That's one of the theories.
Yes, but I would love to hear your take on it. Yes,
only if you promise to reciprocate, because I want to hear what your thoughts are on it. But yes, it's so fascinating. And okay, so here's where I start with it. big picture, absolutely. Yes. Could be that situation, as we've just talked about, how it can create tension and affect you a certain way that way. Here, the thing that is interesting to me is you know how they say, like, this is why it's good to have a good hypothesis, because you can pretty much prove anything. Sometimes if you can collect enough evidence to show that anything is true or whatever that idea is. So I can see one side of, you just kind of have to at some point pick something so that everybody can start to create together, because up until then you have a lot of different kind of tunings of instruments. You still have different tunings now, especially in some like Middle Eastern and Asian countries. They've got some different tunings and just different things like that. But so it makes complete sense. You got to do those things. We got to do, like, right now people are arguing because, I love Apple. I use a lot of products. However, how they won't use certain chords in certain countries. And it's a whole thing, because there's a lot of people that want things to be universal, so everybody has access to it. And I can see that side of things. However, the reason I think it's so easy to get behind the idea that it is some kind of conspiracy to affect people that way is because there's precedence for it. Like, the idea of I think it was the Catholic Church that banned the tritone, which is, two notes that are next to each other, but not in a pleasing, harmonic way. It creates a very dissonant kind of sound. And they called it the devil's note, because they believed it was, it was evil. It was going to affect you in a certain way. It puts people not, at unrest, right? Just like we've been talking about. Now, again, whether you can get behind that and go, is there validity to that, or are they just trying to control something? Who knows? But there's obviously something enough there for them to have a conversation and to, persecute people and to feel a certain way about it. So maybe there's some validity to the idea that it can affect you in a certain way. From a personal perspective, I feel this way as a musician, even though it's a little bit lower, because, if when you tune to a tuner, let's say, and you're playing a certain note, it'll, 0 is kind of 440, and then you can tune up and down. And there's a lot of bands in this case, but a lot of people, don't tune to 440 anymore, because it almost, they want that lower, especially in rock music, they want that lower, ballsier sound, right? So they literally will take the instrument and tune it down. And for me, in my music, my sweet spot was always a whole step down from 440. So if you were, playing a E, you're actually kind of playing a D, or if you're playing a D, it's whatever. So I can see, since that already feels better to me underneath it, because 440 never felt natural to me if I was even playing an instrument. True for me. I don't know. What do you think, Alex?
I didn't know. Have you done a search, Alex, and looked for 432 music?
I've done some research, and basically what it seems like is there was a idea by British musicians like, hey, let's try and tune things to 440 for standardization. And that was just it. There was nothing really behind it. And sometime in the late 80s, people started coming up with this conspiracy theory over it, because at the time, the tuning was all over the place. Everything from the high 300s to the low 500s. And the idea was, well, since we have recording technology and since we have broadcasting technology, can we come up with some sort of a standard? Would that be okay? So there didn't really seem to be anything special about that number. It's just something that seemed to sound good. And it was like an entirely optional thing. But, social media likes to invent a bunch of stuff. At the same time, I definitely think that you can manipulate. We know that when you make horror movies, you put in infrasound because that makes people feel uneasy and on the edge of their seats. And how you score different movies will affect how people feel. Something that's a little bit more upbeat is going to make them feel energetic. Something that's a little bit more dramatic and a little bit lower, almost like Wagnerian, exactly like that deep sound that we were just talking about. We use that all the time. We use music to make people feel a certain way all the time, but there's no one musical note that makes everyone feel a certain way, which is what makes a lot of these conspiracies pretty obsolete to me, just because we all have a somewhat unique reaction to all of these pitches.
Well, and you got to wonder if the human body can it even be attuned to sense the difference between 432 and 440? Like a general mood, maybe? What do you think?
If you're a highly trained musician, you can probably spot that, hey, these are different. These are not quite it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just a regular person, you'd have no idea.
Well, and in saying we all have our own styles, I wanted to know your thoughts on EDM, electronic dance music, and trap. I had to research that subgenre of hip hop, but would you consider them to be good music, if you know much about it, to fuck to? That's what my question to you is. What is good music to fuck to? And would you consider electronic with that heavy beat, that constant bass, something that you would play in the bedroom?
That is a good question. Short answer is absolutely. It's going to be great. However, what you both were just saying a minute ago is it's all about relative perspective, right? And so to me, overall, yes, you could. To me, I can see value in both of those. With the EDM side, which I know nowadays it's so hard to pinpoint genres anymore because there's such a variety of it now, and it's all mixed and everything. But to me, EDM was a little bit more of what you were just saying, kind of that constant driving, kind of four in the floor beat with the kick drum just on every single beat. It almost kind of like house music a little bit. I know there's drum and bass and there's different things, but I kind of think I go to that first a little bit. Those two kind of vibes, which is very constant. And so I can see why that would be really good for somebody, and also puts them into a state of mind. People who dig it may even have had experiences where they're at a show and they're tripping on ecstasy or whatever, and listening to that music. Music is a great memory inducer. So put you in that frame of mind of already, having the dopamine going off from the drugs and everything. So it kind of gets you in that flow. For me, I would gravitate towards the trap side of things. And for those that don't know, the way I would describe trap anyway is almost like you took the kind of structure and elemental nature of dubstep when it came out and blew everybody away. First time I heard Skrillex, I was just like, what? I've got to figure out more about this. I've never heard anything like that. It sounds like a Transformers making music. Like, it was so awesome. But you take that and then you mix it with kind of the groove of hip hop, right? So you've got the low, kind of 808 kick drum kind of feeling, that lower beat, and typically a little bit of a more of a groove, a rhythm to it. And I'm much more that way. If I'm having sex, it's a little bit more groove oriented. So I can see why somebody would really gravitate to that side of things, especially with the bass being able to rattle you, like we were talking about earlier, to kind of rumble your tummy already. That's the direction I would go with it. I don't know. What about y'all?
You like the rumbling while you're getting busy for some foreplay?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well,
so personally, I play EDM during tattoos. So that's my version of it. But
yeah. That's like meditation, right? If you're breathing with a constant beat to get through that experience. I can totally see that.
Exactly. And you can do something similar if you want to do kind of like a lower intensity trap, something like Thelema, Metamorphosis, Off Dream. Those are all artists. So write those down if you're listening. So I would say that's who you go.
Audience just saying, is that an artist or was that a drug? Oh, wait. Hold on,
all artists. I'm not going to suggest drugs on this podcast. That's a different podcast. Yeah. Hit me up on that on the dark web.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I am a little bit apprehensive just because different people have different reactions and they want to play different things. But I do actually have a story that I'll share later in the episode. So
sweet.
Well, I want to pose the question to both you guys. I mean, right from when we were teenagers and making mixtapes to now in adulthood and just wanting to set the tone for an evening with a partner. Do you guys have a sexy night fucking playlist? And who would be at the top of your playlist? Oh, they're both rubbing their faces, rubbing their chins.
Oh boy.
Well, because it threw me off when you referenced us being younger, because like the initial song that I can hear and go to of that time period is Paperboy, Diddy. Like, Oh my gosh. It makes me, it just makes me feel all the feels, you know what I mean? But now modern stuff, oh my gosh. To me, it is so relative, and I like a variety. The places I go is depending on mood. It's like, you know, you can go the route that we were just talking about, that electronic route. Sometimes when I'm in more of kind of a naturalistic mood, the things that are kind of like this Viking rock, like, or not rock, but Viking kind of music coming back, that's like Skald and Wardruna and kind of Viking vibe to them, and they're using, you know, a little bit more older instruments like the hurdy-gurdy and the nickel harpa and all these cool things that just give it such a fresh, authentic feel. But it's animalistic, right? It's like if you're going to kind of get in that mood where you're going to devour the other person a little bit, it's really, or be devoured, it's kind of a cool mood setter.
Interesting.
What about you, Alex?
And Alex?
My wife is more into kind of like the synth wave in the background for a little bit more of like a ambient, more sexy feel.
Oh my gosh, yes. Chill step. Oh my God, all day long. That's my go-to. Actually, that's my answer, Alex. It's always that because that it's a good mood setter. Also, you can keep it going. Like, yes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. That was the complete thought.
He's like, that's what my wife likes. Did you not hear me? That's what
I'm a married man. What do you expect?
Yeah. I'm going through a divorce, so maybe that says I'm like, okay, so depending on the mood, you got this, you got some, we're gonna do some Otis Redding tonight.
But
like,
to be fair, if I did not like it, if I did not enjoy it, then I wouldn't say, okay, yeah. let me put something on. I wouldn't have a library of it either.
Yeah, right.
See, and I like going back to the like rock ballads of the 80s. You know, my husband would never really describe me as like a rock girl, but when it comes to sex, like you put on some Def Leppard, some old Bon Jovi, like that gets me grooving and in the mood, which surprises him.
Yeah.
And then every now and then I like to throw in some Bublé or some Josh Groban, and he starts gagging and then he loses his heart on. So, you know, you got to kind of compromise, right?
This is the most Canadian Gen X thing I've ever heard.
But it is though, because it's like automatically associated with like just panties dropping. You know, if you hear some, you know, Heaven by Warrant or something, it's like, yep, this is what we're supposed to be doing. I don't know what we were going to be doing, but we have to have sex now.
So what is it about those songs though? Like, is it half that we saw the music videos? Like, is that what it is about? Or is it the lyrics? Pour some sugar on me.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little bit of all of it. I think that the visual definitely, it's hard to separate it, right? It's almost like, I mean, it is all one organism. You can't not see it. It was such a visual time period. But also, I think there's probably a side of it of the whole persona was that it was the bad boy, kind of like expressing his emotion and being sweet. And so that's even this other sexier element of, oh, this is a special thing. Not everybody gets this treatment. And so I can see it setting the mood easily that way. These little subliminal suggestions that we don't probably even think about. I'm
just going to sit this one out. I'm not old enough to participate.
Well, hey, let's see. I don't know how old you are. We could play that game. I mean, well, actually, that's what's funny is after that, for a little while, yeah, there really wasn't a lot in rock music, a lot of love songs. I mean, it was more like we're so exhausted from doing so much cocaine that we're just going to sit here and, you know, cry about it for a little while. If y'all want to join, that's cool too. We want to hang out. We're just going to be sad,
and
but that's fine. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. It is a physical manifestation of that feeling, but so good too. Like it captured such that, you know, raw emotion, that state of mind of being in that mode just through sound. You could see it, a mental image. So interesting.
I will say though that Third Eye Blind was super popular when I was just starting, like finishing middle school, starting high school, and it sounded very upbeat and very cheery. And then you listen to the lyrics for like 30 seconds and you're like, oh my God, how did they let us listen to it?
Yes. Slipped it by because it and what's funny to me that you pointed that out is my brother was just making fun of me on an episode we recorded, because even as a songwriter, I don't even remember the words of my own songs. Like words I have an ability to craft them, to recall and remember them. It's just, I don't have that skill. And so a lot of times when I hear music, I'm not listening to the words. I don't even know. Like I got to get to my fifth time really to then go back and listen to it, because I'm breaking down all the music and instruments and just all the different parts of it. Same thing?
Oh, I'm with you there, Mark.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. Last week I went to the Noah Kahan concert with my daughter.
Nice.
And it was uncanny. I think I was the one and only person in the whole entire arena who had my eyes closed, and I'm listening to the banjo, the ukulele, all the acoustic instruments that were on the stage and the talent that was in, but I'm focusing on like the melody, and then every other, like whatever, 13,000, 15,000 people, they were singing every word to every song. And I realized I couldn't even hear the artist. It was the masses. And I realized he's a fucking storyteller, and everyone memorized his stories. They just loved his lyrics. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know one word. Like I was embarrassed.
Well, that's like going to a Frank Turner show. It's kind of the same idea.
Well, I mean, to me though, just definitely don't be embarrassed, because can't say this either. However, I view it as you're probably experiencing on such a different level than those people too, though. And they're missing out on that opportunity to really like let it just absorb it and soak into their body every little vibration, because they're so focused on that story. And that's exactly why people should always remember that art, it's just storytelling. It's an expression. It's not a competition. And so to say something is good or bad, like, well, we might not even be talking about the same thing, because one person's like, I love that song, and the other person doesn't like the instrumentation in it. So they're like, no, it's not for me. But if they actually, like you said, if they sat down and listened to it, in fact, I do that with I've been doing that with country lately, because I grew up around a lot of country. I was not country though, by any stretch of the imagination. So I hated it for so long. And now as I've gotten older, it's kind of cool to just, especially with like Aaron Lewis of Stain crossed over. And I love when people cross over. I always in my music wanted to do that, have a mixture, because you get different people. And I started getting into it and realizing, God damn, these stories are, brutal. They're incredible. So it just all depends on what you're listening to something for, to even know what you're getting out of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I hate to cut this short, Mark, but we could have you on another episode. We could carry on episode number 2 about how music can transition people. They can, transform people. That's a better word, transform people, and really get to the root of us in many ways. But I think we're going to have to cut it short. I think we'll invite you on again, maybe carry on the conversation.
Awesome.
We wanted to thank you for being on the show today and for being a part of our little growing community. But I think with that, we'll say goodbye.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on. It was a blast.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, what a great conversation. I'm so glad Marc was able to join us. But back to the beginning of our show, Alex, you teased our listeners with a little story. You better come through.
Wait, that was so long ago. What would I do? What did I do? What did I say?
Sex, music, maybe a friends with benefits story. Come on. You always have good ones.
Yeah, I know. It's about it's my answer to the mixtape question. So,
okay.
In a way, I used to make mixtapes back in the day. A lot of them were kind of mixed electronic tracks. So they're kind of like DJ sets where there was some music that, yes, this is just something that I got as part of the set. But then other things were things that I composed myself and was kind of trying to weave them through. And I had a friend with, she was more of, just to be completely honest, she more showed up for dick appointments, and I was completely fine with it, that the clinic was open. And she would insist that every time that we would transition from conversation into sex, that I would put on my latest mix.
So you wooed her with your mixed CDs.
And I didn't even know that that's what I did. I did that completely. I had no idea that that's what I was doing. But it was a bit of an ego boost because I was just like, it's nice. And she actually told me that, yeah, this actually works really well. I really like it. And I think that if you wanted to like take the show on the road and do some more professional DJ stuff, then I think this would work great. This is the kind of stuff that I personally like, and I know a lot of people do. So I'm like, that's really nice. Like it's, I get my dick stroked, I get my ego stroked. This is lovely. Please come again.
Good deal. Good deal. Good deal.
I can't believe you didn't comment on the please come again, but that's fine. That's fine. Not every joke lands. That's fine. That's fine. So normally this is the part of the show where ChatGPT would take us out, but again, he's been fired for cause. And instead, we're just going to say, stay in touch, be a part of that 1% who actually email us or find us on our website, talkingkinkpodcast.com. Use the contact form. It's there. We read it. As you can see, we take your email. We take your feedback very seriously, and feel free to share stories or suggest topics for any upcoming episodes. If you know someone who would make a great guest, in your opinion, send them our way. We're happy to talk to them.
And I'm going to leave it with a call to action. I'd love for our listeners to send us what is on their sexy playlists. Send us links, make suggestions. Maybe we can put together our own little sexy song list if they email it to talkingkinkwithAlexandEllie@gmail.com. So follow us on social media. Please push like and subscribe to our podcast after listening. But most importantly, please share the links or retweet our posts and help us to reach our 1,000 downloads.
Ooh, yeah. Okay. About that. We passed that a while ago, and
Woo!
we're actually closer to 2,000 now. So,
oh, nice. Okay.
So they can help us with that.
That is fantastic. I am so impressed for our little podcast with our little community. I think we're doing pretty well.
With zero advertising and nothing more than word of mouth referrals.
Well, let's sign off then. Let's say goodbye. Until next time. Have a good week, Alex.
Bye, Ellie. Bye, everyone.